Where the Lonely Ones Roam by Glimmerglanger. Read by Exmanhater. Adora caught her outside the door, her voice raw when she said, "Catra?" "I don't want to talk about it," Catra said, as Adora fell into step beside her. "I didn't know," Adora said, after a moment, cautious. "It probably happened to your family too," Catra said, sharp. "That's where most of us came from." She heard Adora stop walking, and it dragged her to a stop as well. She could hear Adora's breathing, fast and pained, and she turned with a grimace. Shit, Adora, that's... The embrace caught her by surprise. Adora pulled her close, arms wrapped tight around her. Her jaw fitted over Adora's shoulder, comfortable, perfect. She shivered, her arms held out like she'd forgotten how they worked, feeling Adora's warmth and smelling the scent of her hair. After a moment, Catra remembered how her body functioned and curled her arms up into place around Adora's back. It felt good. Catra felt herself relax, almost against her will. Tension just drained from her. She sighed, resting her cheek against Adora's shoulder, and said, "I don't think they like me very much here." Adora snorted a laugh. "That's okay," she said. "Politics don't require you to like one another. We should get some sleep." Adora took her to a room with a high ceiling and a fine bed, and, to one side, a smaller mattress on the ground with a single blanket over it. Catra stared down at the little bed, the ache in her chest stretching out. Adora flushed. "I thought maybe you'd want to stay in here? You can have the main bed, I don't use it." She pulled off her boots and sat down on her little cot, shrugging off her jacket. Catra watched her, knowing she shouldn't, and able to stop. She shook herself when Adora looked up and blinked at her. Catra sat at the end of the small cot, almost brushing Adora's shoulder. She dragged her fingers back through her hair and blew out a breath. "Nice place you've got here," she said. It was hard to imagine living in a place like this, but, she thought, maybe she couldn't blame Adora for wanting it. Adora didn't answer. She leaned forward instead, bracing her elbows on her knees. She said, her voice quiet, "You knew about it all along, didn't you? About what the Horde really was. About the princesses." "Yeah," Catra said, slumping back against the wall, curling her legs up and wrapping her arms around them. She wondered sometimes how Adora had not known. "Yeah, I always knew." Adora hung her head. "The Horde was evil." Catra hummed. "Agreed, but you destroyed Hordak. Shadow Weaver is gone." Adora nodded. Her hair fell over one of her shoulders. Her profile caught Catra's attention and held it. "But you're not all wrong about the princesses either. They don't see all the problems around them." "I know," Catra said, sighing, closing her eyes. She felt exhausted. "You beat back the threat for them, and now they'll just crawl back into their towers and lord it over the rest of us until the next time everything goes wrong. When they do this all over again, no one is going to stop them." Adora made a soft, amused sound. Catra cracked one eye open to look at what had prompted the good humor and found Adora staring at her, one eyebrow arched. "Oh, I don't know about that," she said, swaying sideways to nudge Catra's shoulder. "Come on, we need to get some sleep. We're going to have a busy day tomorrow." All told, it took them the entirety of the day to get signatures on the paper. They had to argue out a border. One was already proposed. Catra thought Adora had put it together. And for some reason, rules regulating trade. That was all an adventure nothing in Catra's life had prepared her for, but they got through it. There were sticking points. "We would like a list of all former Horde soldiers in your settlements," Angela had said, midway through the day, and Catra only stared at her for a moment. "No," she said, frowning. Angela sighed. She constantly looked beleaguered by the conversation. "We have a right to question." "No," Catra repeated. "I'm not handing over my people to whatever it is you want to do to them. Most of the soldiers were orphan kids." Angela frowned, sitting in her raised chair. "But not all of them." Catra stared at her. "I check everyone who stays in our settlements. You're just going to have to take my word for it that there are not dangerous elements." She wouldn't be standing aside when it came to the safety of her people. Adora leaned down and spoke by Angela's ear, and after a moment Angela leaned back. "Very well," she said. "I can see that this is a sticking point. Perhaps we can discuss extradition at a later date." "Yeah, perhaps," Catra said, and the hours passed like that, with a careful navigation of a dozen prickly points, aided by Adora's interventions. By the time Catra finally signed the treaty, it still didn't quite feel real. She stared down at the wet ink on the paper, and Angela said, quietly, "For what it is worth, I felt every loss suffered by my people." Catra looked up and stared into her large eyes. There was grief there, clearly enough. But there was also life. Catra shuddered and glanced at the walls, the gleaming soldiers. She smelled food, the dinner meal well on the way to completion, and felt her gorge rise in her throat. "You felt it," she said, testing out the weight of the words and finding them wanting. But it didn't matter anymore. They'd signed their treaty. She didn't have to stay here any longer. She shrugged. "Well, I guess that makes it all right then."